There's a crack in the concrete on the 22nd floor of the tower Pfizer built, 235 East 42nd Street, 2 blocks from Grand Central. It's 8 in the morning, July 7th, 2026, and the steam fitter staring at that crack is about to save a lot of lives. Because 1 floor down, he finds the reason for it. A steel column, one of the legs carrying a dozen floors of skyscraper above his head, is bending. Not cracked, not rusted. Bending, like a drinking straw right before it snaps. Within the hour, workers are running down the stairwells. By afternoon, the fire department has sealed 5 blocks of Midtown Manhattan. 4 buildings stand empty, and the city draws a line on the map that engineers hoped they'd never draw around a New York skyscraper, a collapse zone. Here's what most people get wrong about skyscrapers. They don't fall like trees, they fold. 1 column gives, the floors above it sag, and all that weight goes hunting for a new place to stand. If it doesn't find one, the building comes down through itself, 1 floor into the next. This building had already started. The floors above that bending column had sunk as much as 4 inches, and they were still moving. So how does a 65-year-old tower, a tower that stood through everything since 1961, start folding on a quiet Tuesday morning? The answer is a story about what New York is doing to its skyline right now, at a scale nobody has ever tried. It's a story the building spent a full year trying to warn people about. The warnings are sitting in public records, with dates on them. And it's a story this exact neighborhood has lived through before. A 6-minute walk from that cracked slab stands another tower that once came just as close to falling and kept it secret for 17 years. The same family name is on the blueprints of both. This is how a skyscraper almost folded in the middle of Manhattan, and why it will keep almost happening. Rewind to 8 a.m. that Tuesday. The tower has been a construction site for 2 years, crews gutting it floor by floor, turning offices into apartments. Sean Dow is a steam fitter, one of the union workers who fit and weld the heavy pipe in a big building. He's on the 22nd floor when he sees it, a crack running through the concrete slab, wide enough to make him stop. Now, cracks happen. Concrete cracks. Most of them mean nothing, and a man who's spent his life on job sites has seen thousands. He takes a picture anyway. Then he does the thing that ends up mattering. He goes downstairs to look at what's holding that cracked slab up. And on the 21st floor, he finds a steel column with a bend in it. "I was there with a group of general contractors," he said later, "and we decided it was time to evacuate the building." Which is a union man's way of saying, "We ran." They moved down through the tower, floor by floor, pulling people out as they went. Around the same time, somebody calls the fire department about bricks falling from the building. By the time the trucks pull up, workers are pouring out onto 42nd Street. The fire department takes one look and starts drawing lines. A battalion chief orders everything around the tower cleared, 5 blocks frozen. 4 neighboring buildings are emptied and locked, plus the ground floor restaurant of a 5th. Streets around Grand Central, some of the busiest in New York, go silent behind police tape. Because inside, the building is still moving. The floors from 21 to 26 have cracked and sagged, dropped in places by 4 inches. That number comes from the developer himself. And 4 inches doesn't sound like much until you say what it really is. The top third of a skyscraper, slowly sitting down. The mayor says it plainly that afternoon. The building has kept moving since city teams arrived. Nobody knows yet whether it's done. What the engineers do next is strangely simple. Jacks. Heavy-duty steel props, the same idea you use to change a tire, scaled up until it can catch a building. Go in under the sagging floors. Then new steel columns, floor after floor. By Wednesday morning, floors 18 through 23 are shored. By Thursday, there's temporary steel running from the 9th floor all the way up to the roof. One civil engineer watching from outside called what was happening inside extremely concerning, though not, in his view, on the edge of sudden collapse. Another, a past president of the National Structural Engineers Association, said part of the building might have to be demolished before construction can ever restart. That's where things stood. A tower in a neck brace, 2 blocks from Grand Central, while the city held its breath. It held. But here's the question that should bother you. A buckled column isn't a mystery of nature. A column bends for exactly one reason. It was asked to carry more than it could. So, who asked? The answer isn't age. It isn't rust or a bad batch of steel from 1961. It's that this building, quietly, floor by floor, was being turned into something it had never been. And to understand how close Midtown came, you have to see what they were doing to this tower, because nobody had ever tried it at this scale before. In 1959, Pfizer broke ground on a new headquarters at 2nd Avenue and 42nd Street. The drug company was booming, and it wanted a tower to match. The architects were Emery Roth and Sons, a family firm whose name is on dozens of Manhattan towers. File that name away. It comes back. The building they delivered in 1961 was pure international style. 33 stories, 409 feet, a clean box of glass and steel. Pfizer took 18 floors and moved in 1,000 people. And for 60 years, the tower did exactly what it was designed to do: hold up desks, filing cabinets, and typewriters. Then the world changed underneath it. Pfizer moved out. The pandemic emptied office towers across America, and New York found itself with a strange problem: steel boxes standing half empty all over Manhattan, in a city desperate for apartments. Enter Nathan Berman. His company, Metro Loft, more or less invented the modern office-to-apartment conversion. For decades, he'd been buying tired office towers in the financial district, gutting them, and filling them with renters. That was the playbook. Buy it empty, cut it open, bring in the people. At 235 East 42nd, he and his partner David Werner went for the record books. Werner paid $407 million just for the lease. Together, they lined up a $700 million construction loan, the biggest ever for a residential conversion in New York. The plan: 1,600 apartments across this tower and its shorter neighbor, 400 of them affordable, with 100,000 square feet of amenities on top. A spa, a rooftop pool. The largest office-to-apartment conversion in the history of the United States. Leasing was supposed to open this summer. Now, here's the engineering problem, and it's the heart of this entire story. An office tower and an apartment tower are not the same machine. To turn one into the other, you cut new holes through the concrete slabs, for plumbing, for stairs, for light. You move walls. You add gyms and terraces and pools. And on this project, you add brand new floor space, roughly 18,000 square feet of it, spread across 15 of the upper floors. That figure comes from Berman himself. Every one of those changes does the same thing. It changes the load, the weight each column underneath has to carry every second forever. And columns fail in their own special way. A short, thick column crushes. You'd need an enormous force. But a tall, slender column doesn't crush. It buckles, pushed down on a drinking straw. It holds. Then it snaps sideways, all at once, with almost no warning. Engineers have had the math since 1744, and the math has a cruel feature. Double a column's unsupported length, and it doesn't get twice as weak. It gets 4 times weaker. Strength falls with the square. That's why a bent column frightens engineers more than almost anything else on a job site. A cracked slab can hang on for years. A bent column has already failed. It just hasn't finished yet. Somewhere in this conversion, the new weight found 2 columns on the 21st floor that couldn't take it. Why those 2? The developer's own explanation, on camera, might be the most remarkable quote in this whole story. The columns, Berman said, were either not properly reinforced or missed in the reinforcement process. Missed. Read that again. The developer of the largest conversion in American history says his project may have simply missed 2 columns. Skipped the 2 legs that needed strengthening before thousands of square feet of new weight came down on them. How does a project this size, with world-class engineers on the payroll, miss 2 columns? That's what investigators are trying to answer right now. But here's what makes it worse. The building had been sending up flares for a year, and every one of them is sitting in the city's own records, with a date on it. Since July of 2025, the Department of Buildings had hit this project with 7 construction safety violations, more than $32,000 in penalties, a year before any column bent. Walk the timeline. August 2025. A metal panel falls from the 33rd floor to the sidewalk, on one of the busiest streets in Manhattan. Nobody is hit. The city fines the project $10,000 and briefly shuts the entire site down. December. 2 more violations. A worker is hurt falling from a ladder, and the contractors don't report it to the city. That's not optional paperwork. Reporting injuries is how the buildings department knows where to look. Another $10,000 fine. And here's the detail that should make you sit up. For all of those violations, records show no money had actually been paid last year. The project filed paperwork, certificates of correction, and the penalties went away. Let's be precise, because precision matters here. None of those violations caused the buckling. A falling panel doesn't bend a column. But that's not the point. The point is the pattern, a site where things kept going wrong on the record, in public view, for a year before 2 columns quietly ran out of strength. After July 7th, the tone changed overnight. The buildings department has now ordered the owner to bring in an independent engineer for a forensic investigation, a formal autopsy on a building that didn't quite die. The city says it's examining everyone's role, the developer, the contractors, and the private inspectors who signed off along the way. The developer, for his part, went to the cameras with a different message. Calm down. This building never was in any risk of any sort of collapse, Berman said. The damage, he insisted, touched less than 4% of a 950,000 square foot building, a localized situation. So, on paper, a contained construction problem, professionally handled. In reality, the city drew a collapse zone around his tower while the floors were still moving. Both of those things can be true at once. And that's exactly what makes this bigger than one building, because if the largest conversion in America can lose track of 2 columns, what does that say about the 90,000 other apartments being carved out of old towers right now? Hold that number. Because first you need to see the mirror. The wildest part of this story is that it has happened before. Same neighborhood, same quiet almost. A tower 6 minutes walk from 235 East 42nd once spent a whole summer closer to collapse than anyone knew, and the public didn't find out for 17 years. And on its blueprints, in the list of architects, sits the same name, Emery Roth and Sons. 1978, 53rd Street and Lexington Avenue. Citicorp Center is brand new. 59 stories of aluminum and glass with a slanted crown, instantly one of the most recognizable towers in New York. And it stands on stilts. 4 columns, 9 stories tall. But they're not at the corners, where every instinct says they should be. They're at the center of each side. The corners of the tower hang in mid-air. The reason was a church. A small congregation owned the corner of the block and wouldn't sell, so the engineers lifted the skyscraper over it. The weight of 59 floors flows down through giant diagonal braces, shaped like chevrons, into those 4 legs. The structural engineer, William Le Mesurier, had done the wind calculations the way the building code told him to. wind hitting each face straight on. Then, a year after opening day, a student working on a thesis called his office with a question. What about wind that hits the corner at 45 degrees? He ran the numbers. For this stilts and chevrons design, corner winds didn't raise the load on some joints by a little. They raised it by 160%. Then came the second discovery, the one that turned a math problem into a nightmare. The braces were supposed to be welded. To save money during construction, many of the joints had been bolted instead. Weaker, much weaker. Le Mesurier worked through the full accounting and arrived at a number no engineer ever wants to own. On the roof sat a tuned mass damper, a giant concrete block designed to swing against the wind and calm the tower. If the power to it failed during the wrong storm, the odds of Citicorp Center coming down were about 1 in 16 per year. Those are the odds of rolling a double six. So they fixed it in secret. Night after night, after the office workers went home, welders climbed into the tower's skeleton and plated the bolted joints with heavy steel. And while they worked, a hurricane named Ella formed in the Atlantic and began moving toward New York. The city drew up quiet evacuation plans. The storm turned out to sea. The welding finished, and nobody outside a small circle knew any of it had happened, until a magazine writer pieced the story together in 1995, 17 years later. Now hold the two stories up against each other, because the rhyme is almost too neat. Two towers, a 6-minute walk apart, both discovered at the edge of disaster by one person paying attention. A student's question in 1978, a steam fitter's eyes in 2026. But one was fixed in secret, and the other in front of live cameras, with a collapse zone and press conferences, and the whole world watching. That's what actually changed in 48 years. Not the math. The math doesn't care. What changed is that now we watch. And Emery Roth and Sons, they designed the Pfizer Tower outright. On Citicorp, they were the associate architects, working alongside the design team. Nothing sinister in that. It's just how small Manhattan really is. A handful of firms built most of this skyline, and the same handful of failure modes has been stalking all of it ever since. Stories like these are the reason this channel exists, near misses that stay buried in records and old blueprints until somebody goes digging. If you'd rather know how close these things actually come, stick around. There's always another one. We're already taking the next one apart. Citicorp was saved by a question asked in time. 235 was saved by a man who looked at a crack and refused to shrug. Which leaves the last question, the one this whole story has been circling. How many more towers are about to be asked to do a job they were never designed for? Here's the number. At the start of 2026, more than 90,000 apartments were in the pipeline to be carved out of American office buildings, up 28% in a single year, 4 times the pace of 2022. New York leads the country with more than 16,000 of them. This year alone, the city is set to start 9.5 million square feet of conversions, more than double last year. There's a tax break driving it, and a real need underneath it. The offices are empty and people need homes. Nobody serious wants this boom to stop. Even the mayor, while his own buildings department investigates the near miss, called conversions part of the city's answer to the housing crisis. But he said the other half plainly too. What happened on 42nd Street, in his words, was clearly a breakdown in that process. An engineer can tell you exactly where these things break. A conversion is a bet that you understand a 60-year-old building better than the people who built it. The drawings are usually incomplete. Sometimes the building doesn't quite match the drawings at all. A beam that isn't where the plans promise. A column that was patched in 1980 and never documented. You're operating on a patient using somebody else's chart. Most of the time, With deep enough checks, it goes fine. Thousands of these projects have finished safely. One professor who studies them said this project was unusually ambitious and put the lesson better than I could. The message isn't that conversions are dangerous. It's that old buildings deserve new questions before you ask them to carry new loads. At 235 East 42nd, the questions ran out 2 columns short. As for the tower, the developer says the buckled columns and beams will be replaced, the damaged floors rebuilt, and the project finished on schedule, with the first tenants moving in next year. An outside engineer thinks part of the building may need to come down first. The forensic investigation will decide who's right and what it costs. As of this July, that's where it stands. But zoom out one last time, because the ending of this story hasn't been written yet. Right now, across America, 90,000 apartments are being cut out of towers that were designed for filing cabinets and typewriters. Almost all of them will be fine. But in every single one, somewhere around the 21st floor, there's a column quietly doing arithmetic nobody has rechecked in 60 years. On July 7th, the difference between a construction story and a catastrophe came down to one steamfitter who saw a crack and went downstairs to find the reason. The building held because the man looked. The next one will need somebody to look, too.